So we're Erin and Robert Lockridge, and we live here in Norwood, Ohio.
So we live here and we make home here, and what we mean by that is we have kids and we have neighbors and we work here in the neighborhood. And my work in particular, I'm a parish farmer. So what I mean by that is I feel called by God to tend the lands of the neighborhood, prayerfully tend the lands of the neighborhood, and grow food for the people of the neighborhood, and trust that God will provide for me and my family provision, financial provision. We run a cafe up the street where we serve that food. Our cafe, it's called For the Life of the World Cafe, which is a super long title for cafe. And those are, that's from John 6:51. Jesus gave his life for the life of the world. And I think made in his image, all people, adults, elderly, children, everybody, like that is what we all long to do, is live our lives for the life of the world and to find our way in that direction. This garden, as you can see, it has no fences around it. And so the deer, the rabbits, and the people sometimes come and help themselves. And so there is at times a sense of vulnerability because we depend upon the food from this garden for our livelihood, but it's an invitation to trust God more deeply and to get to know people, to not, to remember that everybody is created in the image of God. And so that's what we seek to do. Yeah. Have lots of chances to practice it. As a kid, I'd grown up gardening a lot with my father, and there's something really beautiful about putting seeds into soil and the mystery of how God has created the world such that those seeds then grow, not because we've really done that much at all, but because that's the way God created them to be. And then they bear fruit, and we get to tend them and serve them and, in a sense, listen to the land and the plants and respond to them, hopefully in a caring way. So that was a way that I learned to pray with the whole of my body, where God calls us to love the Lord with all of our strength, with all of our mind, with all of our soul. And this felt like a very integrated way for me to care for the people of my neighborhood and to hold on to the hope of the gospel. Understanding our mortality, I think we can have wisdom and we can love well, knowing that there are limits. Yeah. That things are not just to be kind of, as Erin said, pressed into service, or children are not just be, forced in a direction. We have to encourage them, right. As Erin said, tend them, serve them, listen to them. And I think the listening and responding is a big part of it. So like a really dry soil this time of year, I just have to listen to it and say, well, God, I'm not going to plant anymore. It's done, and
it's like both children and plants can disciple us in the path of deepening trust. And Robert will come home a lot and say, it's with that struggle, well, the beets aren't germinating and I just can't get them to. And he says, please, Erin, just keep reminding me that I need to trust God. The ultimate goal is the long-term goal, which is stewarding them towards being citizens of God's kingdom for eternity. And so what does it look like to have that goal in mind? And sometimes that means that you see their repeated outbursts as or their repeated struggling through their own interpersonal problem or whatever it is as practice. And so you trust, you have to be stewarded yourself in the process of trusting their process and their journey.
Yeah, so I think that as parents, I think a similar sort of lens, parenting is very humbling. It's amazing and it's profoundly humbling. I can't imagine loving any people more than our children, and I also am humbled in many ways, like pulling thistle time and time again. It's hard. There's challenges to it. And there's sometimes when I want the children to be a certain way for efficiency's sake, because we have things to do and places to go, and that is part of life. They have to be and do certain things at certain times. But I think there is a necessary letting go and receiving what is. And at times that might mean the child is sleepy. The child needs to rest. The land needs to rest. Or it needs to be more, like a young seedling that emerges is very vulnerable. And so recognizing vulnerability, there is a time to let things be, when if you try to do more, it's actually making things worse. And I think that sometimes with my son, he is very strong-willed in a beautiful way, and sometimes I press into him in a way that isn't ultimately helpful. I need to back off. And similarly, that same message or that same lesson we experienced in the garden. Like, I remember when I first moved here, it was raining. It was in the spring, it was raining, and I felt very desperate for trying to get into the ground, like get things in the ground. It's time to plant certain things. And I was out there, trying to move heavy, wet soil, and all that does is it wears you out, and it completely destroys the soil structure so that things can't grow. So there's a time to just let the rain fall. As parents, we want our children to know the way, and we fear that they might not know the way. And I guess I need to learn to trust more deeply that God is closer to our children than we are, and His leading voice, His guidance, He is pursuing them even now in a way that's more intimate and more connected to them than my sort of parenting desires could ever be. This piece of land has become sacred to me because I feel like I've encountered God here. And, I come down here, I'll be down here tomorrow long before sunrise and, under the stars, picking flowers. There'll probably be deer out here. There are 3 bucks that come and eat the tomatoes. But I think that's that communion, that God desires for us to commune with Him. And that's the good news.